Hi everybody, welcome back to this video where we're going to try and answer at least another question or two, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy so that he can go ahead and specify which of those questions we're going to deal with today.
Yes, thank you very much. It's good to be back. And yeah, like you said, yesterday we answered a few questions based on a survey we'd sent out. And yesterday, the topic at hand was, what trouble do you run into when you're trying to draw a dark background in your drawings? And like we'd heard a lot of horror stories from the survey that people who had ruined their entire portrait, a perfectly great looking portrait was ruined because they pressed too hard or ripped their paper or made things too black. So Darrel answered, not only when it's most effective to add a dark background to your portraits, but also the proper application, what things to look for, what things to do, how to make it look just right. And today, as promised, we want to go ahead and talk about the dreaded graphite sheen, as it's called. It's that shininess that happens when you press too hard with your graphite, or you're trying to cover a lot of area with graphite, and it's reflective, it shines back, it's distracting. And a lot of people had a question about how to get rid of that or how to avoid it in the first place. So we'll cover a couple other topics as well, but I want to jump right in, Darrel, and get to the bottom of this. So let's start talking about it. First off, what is graphite shine or sheen, and what causes it?
Well, I think there are a number of factors, but graphite, as many of you know, is a shiny media. It can be, but we can make it even more visible and worse, I guess, by the way we apply it. And so going back to many of the things that I talk about and try to introduce and establish in your minds through the 5-pencil method are things like be very aware of the pressure that you used, the layering effect, and putting on softer layers. You can gradually increase your value so that you can have the desired intensity, and yet, like we just talked about yesterday, oftentimes it doesn't need to be as dark as you may think it needs to be. So we want to get rid of these preconceived ideas when we approach a background or graphite, and when we see something dark, we don't want to just have this mental attitude, well, I'm going to make it dark. You watch this. I can get it darker than you. And yet that isn't always the case. We want balance in our art. And so something can look quite dark just because of what it's contrasting with. And many times that's enough. If we go too much darker, it can weaken our drawing. So when we're doing a drawing, there are a number of things that can make it even more reflective than we may already have to deal with as far as graphite goes. So let me go ahead and just show you a couple things here. And if I have that mentality again that I'm going to create something dark, now I realize there's other aspects of your drawing that can actually be shiny too, but much of it is because we have flattened down the tooth of the paper. So, this is going to be very crude, but if we were looking at the paper like this, and we're looking at the edge, and we could magnify this, we would see something, we'll just make a cartoon out of it, we'd see something that maybe has what we call teeth, and they're pointing up. And this is what we drag the pencil across when we're going and leaving graphite on the paper. Well, these little points and this rough texture is what is actually taking the graphite off of your pencil lead and letting it adhere to the drawing. It can actually probably accumulate a little down in the recesses, but often it's going to be up on the top. It might be, depending on how much we put on there, it might be just creating the darker portions on the top of the tooth. And then those white dots that are left over is what's down in the recesses, down in the bottom. Our pencil doesn't go in there as well. And so sometimes that becomes a problem, and sometimes we can take full advantage of that and make a texture out of it. But when we try really hard to go ahead and fill in the white dots, those little recesses that didn't quite get the graphite. Then we end up by mashing this down, and we end up with something probably we're folding over our tooth, and it's more like this. And that becomes a problem too, because we're going ahead and now taking away this natural diffusing of a surface, these multiple facets of a surface, and we're now making it more the same. And we're also trapping in graphite down in the recesses, so it makes it much more difficult to erase. This is one of the problems that I have with tortillons, paper stumps. When we're burnishing something, we end up by mashing that tooth down and smoothing it out, and now that graphite is permanently trapped down in what were just little recesses in here. And so if I do the application properly, well, I can actually just tap my eraser in here, and if I use this kneaded eraser, which is soft enough that it actually catches some of that, it presses down in there a little bit, and it actually captures some of that graphite that's stuck down there in the bottom, and we can pick it back out. And naturally, if it's on the top, we can go ahead and lighten it up. We can do that much better if I don't put too much pressure. But if I'm thinking about something being dark, or I'm not paying attention to how I'm applying my pencil on the majority of my drawing, then I have a tendency to maybe point my pencil more directly at the paper. And this is going to create that point that is going to possibly score. And so when I'm scribbling as well, it ends up by creating something that is going to be, well, I'm going to get this dark. And now I've done this, and I've taken away my options for being able to lift off my graphite with the kneaded eraser. And because now I don't have this varying texture, all these different facets. So when the light is shining on it, it's broken up. You won't have near as much shine with this as you do with this. Because now what I've done here is exactly what you see here. In fact, it might even be squashed down even more than that. It might be pretty smooth. And so let's just see if we can pick up a little of that graphite shine that we are, oh, look at that. Can you see that in the camera? I hope you can, because that's very, very indicative of what happens in our drawings. Now, when we put that graphite, which can, especially when it's concentrated and uninterrupted on a surface, on a smooth surface, there we have that light shining on it, and it becomes a real annoyance. And we not only can see it when we have a light a certain direction, but it very often will shine right back at us, and it makes it very difficult for us to even see the actual range of values that we may have on our drawing, because it's reflecting right back up into my eyes, and I'm not seeing things as they truly are. So now, one of the reasons that I like the tapered stroke is because I get to glide on and glide off, and I get to feather on a value onto my paper. It is feathered on enough that I don't have to worry about it mashing the tooth down, but it will just graze the top here. Now, there are other ways that I can go ahead and get some of that graphite down into the recesses and not have the dots, but I want to protect this texture, the tooth of the paper, as much as possible. So when I'm coming on here with that sweep, and I'm just making sure that I don't put any more pressure than I need to on my paper, and practicing with the patches and the 5-pencil method core concepts, and thinking of this as a principle, and becoming very sensitive to how much pressure I'm using, and backing off if I start getting too much, it is going to really help me to avoid the kind of damage that causes the graphite shine. So now I'm applying this, and because I obviously am not going to get this as dark as I want, and maybe I don't need it this dark. It depends on what I'm contrasting this with, remember. And so if I want to increase the value, though, right here I'm using a 2B pencil, and it's fairly soft, but not as soft and dark as the 4B would be. And I can come over this now utilizing the proper grade of pencil to achieve my values. And the more layers I put on, the more I'm lingering, the more I'm going over a surface carefully, but albeit putting on another layer and another layer and another layer, it's going to continue getting darker. And yet I am not going to have damaged my paper. Now, one of the things that helps us get a little of the graphite down into the recesses is being able to brush this texture. And it knocks some of this loose graphite down into the recesses, into these deep pits in the paper that normally would show as white, and it gives it a funny grain to it. And you can see the grain here. What we've been doing here is writing on top. So I can take my brush. It isn't going to do this perfectly because I haven't taken enough time to do all the different layers. But this is going to help me, knock some of that loose graphite that's up in the points, up on the top of the tooth, and distribute it down in, but with a soft enough brush that I don't have to worry about it damaging my tooth and laying it over on its side and making that very shiny surface. So now I like I told you, I can continue getting darker and darker. I can continue going different directions, which helps. And every time I put a new layer on here, being very careful about the amount of pressure, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to increase the value, to gradually get there, and yet not have something that's so damaged or having the reflective quality near as much as I would with if I don't care about the pressure and I'm just going in there thinking again, oh, I want to make this dark. Oh, I want to get there in a hurry. I want to be able to get this done. And all those things become factors that help you damage your surface. Remember, I want to protect my surface as much as possible because then it's always receptive to more graphite if I'm careful, because I have maintained this tooth which scrapes off the graphite as I go over the surface. If I lay it down at some point, I'm only going to be able to go so far and it won't receive anything more. It just slides over the surface and no longer has an opportunity to leave the graphite behind, which will keep increasing the value. Now, I think I'll just take just a minute here and continue building this up. And if I go different directions, this is one of the things that helps us keep from having, like borders around objects. I'm trying to put a dark background on. It helps me to be able to keep from coming up with patterns and maybe consistent gaps. This helps break it up so that I can continue coming up with, even though there's some texture to it. And like I said yesterday, I want it to be a texture because I want it to complement the drawing and the integrity of the pencil. Graphite is so wonderful because that it has such a raw and yet refined ability. And I just love it. It's just such a natural thing. But anyway, I'm using the appropriate pencils. Now, I could have started with with a harder, lighter pencil, and that would have helped me have even more saturation. Getting rid of this grain is one of the reasons why I do that with my drawings. I always build them up from a 4H, and then I take my next darkest one, and my 2H, and then my HB, and then my 2B. And I'm not only layering in how long I draw on a surface, and putting different additional layers to increase the value so it's just right, and I'm still in control, but I have the opportunity to use the appropriate pencil. I'm just going to get a little more on here, and we'll still have some of those dots, but that's okay. I could just keep working this different directions and gradually get rid of that. May seem like a slow process. A whole lot better to have been able to stop at just the right level of value and to be able to know that I can pick it off if I want. Let's just see if we can pick that off. Let's see. Here's a Mono Zero eraser. These are so wonderful. But now, with repeated strokes, I'm able to get some of it, but it's also smearing it because there's so much graphite on here. let's see what happens if we do it on this one. You can see how much brighter the line is because I'm able to remove far more of it because I haven't mashed that graphite down into the paper. Now let's see something else. I'm gonna repair this. It's a wonderful thing again about the stroke and thinking about how I apply it, the gliding on, the gliding off, that I can come up to an edge now and actually repair it. I cover this in the kneaded eraser little lessons too, because the kneaded eraser gives us a wonderful opportunity to remove something without having a harsh edge like we just did with this Mono Zero. But still, with a pointed pencil and the right stroke, I can go ahead and do this repair. Just a fun little diversion here. And I don't have a score mark. So see what happens here. If I score and I make a line that is making a groove, then now I've created another groove in the paper, and my light is reflecting off of this surface. It's reflecting off the surface as it's flat. It may be reflecting off of this surface, depending. Let's just say if I've created new grooves in the paper, now I have several ways that the light is going to reflect off, but it's going to be much worse than if I have this natural, wonderful, varying texture. They're going to be hard, shiny, mashed down surfaces. So now let's just see what happens here. The next phase in limiting shine is not only how you apply it and making sure that you're only going as far as you need to without having that mental determination that you're going to go way on past because you're going to make it dark. Now we have the spray. So you know what happens. I'm going to brush this so it knocks some of that graphite down under the tooth of the paper again. And I could draw on it indefinitely and continue. It's dulling down those little white specks. But now, as I spray it, I want to make sure that when I spray this with a workable fixative, I use Krylon most often, Blair, and a number of companies have it, but I suggest you stick with workable fixative. You can put on more layers and make it permanent, or you can go ahead and put on less just to protect it. I would be very careful. I don't use workable fixative unless I really either don't need to work on my drawing anymore or I am going to send it off and I need to have a little protection. But it stabilizes the graphite. It's just going, the more you use, the less you're going to be able to get it off of the paper, because this would seal some of your graphite down into the recesses of the tooth as well. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just play with this here for a second and try just spraying 1/2 of this. Now let's try this one. I'm going to just spray 1/2 of this graphite that is so shiny. Look at that shine. Can you see that pick up in the camera? Look at that. That's so typical. And it's because everything is so close together that when we use that graphite, which has a tendency to be shiny, we will, I'm going to put this down so I don't get my tabletop sprayed, but I'm going to spray this. And I'm going to do little bits. I'm going to do that until I have the opportunity to seal it up enough, stabilize it enough that I don't pick up any with a tissue. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to say, okay, how much more spray do I need? Well, let me see. Oh, look, it comes off on that tissue. I guess I better spray it again. You want to wait till it's good and dry, otherwise you'll be spraying something that's in reality somewhat loose, moist. It isn't really moist, but well, that looked like it was just enough. Look, I didn't take any graphite off. Now this is stabilized. Now, I want to see the difference. See if you can tell the difference on the shine. Look at that. And that's just from workable fixative. Now, see, I could reverse the advantage I just had. Look at that shine. And this is not near as much. If I maybe just put a little airy coat over it even more, I might be able to dull it down even more. But that's because it is diffusing that surface and making sure that it isn't quite as reflective and mashed down. And that's also what gives you the ability to also draw over it if you want to, because it actually is laying down a little bit of a texture. But I hope you can see that in the camera, because that's very important. Just that little bit of spray dulled it down and made it so it isn't so reflective. But now what I could also do to defeat my purpose is to come over here. I didn't try this beforehand. I just think it'll work. Just from my experience. We want to make sure we don't use too much spray. Let's see if this makes it shiny. We might both learn something here. If the more I use, the more it is probably going to create a coating on there that is actually going to make it shiny once again, or at least not as dull as it was before we had that non-reflective surface. We cut way down on it, but it's starting to pick up probably a little bit more of a shine once again. And so you want to be careful. Only use as much as you need, and test it after just going back and forth one time. Then test it with your tissue again, whatever you're going to use, and just touch that graphite and see if it comes off on the tissue. That way you'll be able to know exactly where to stop, and you can make sure. Now see, you can see where I touched it, because it was, again, had that sticky or that surface on there that is somewhat wet, and so I kind of roughed it up. I went on there too quickly. But look at how shiny the part is that we never treated at all. And so there you have another advantage, not only in how we lay it down and protecting how we put on our how much pressure we use and how we lay down the graphite, but also we're going to be able to dull that down by using the appropriate amount of workable fixative. Now, this is one thing that is obvious here too. I know I'm going on probably a little bit long here, but it just brings one more thing into play. If you are worried about maintaining or drawing at the levels of value that you have worked on, then you don't want to get too much graphite on, or too much spray on here, or it's going to make it darker than you intended it to be. So this is what I really wanted, let's say, in this patch, and this is what's going to happen if I get too carried away with the spray. So everything should be used with discretion and being careful so that you don't have to worry about something going overboard, whether that's as we put too much graphite on the paper or whether we use too much spray. We can go overboard in many ways and lessen what we have tried to achieve, with our drawing. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it certainly does. A lot of information to take in, but good information, just the same. And I like what you said about the whole psychology of the process, and approaching the drawing from the start, thinking I'm not going to press too hard. I'm not trying to get perfect black here. I'm not going for pure black, but thinking that I just want to get the most value I can get without flattening the teeth in my paper. I think that really goes a long way.
Yeah, looking for the appropriate balance, that range of value that makes that particular thing you're drawing work.
Right. I do have some more I want to talk to you about. We've got some more questions from our friends out there, but I'm going to save that for another video. And in the next video, I want to talk to you about about the dark background some more. But in the last video, you shared your Goldilocks drawing, and we got to see the curly hair and how that played against that dark background. And I want to talk a little bit more about separating those two elements, the hair and the background, and especially drawing those curls. Those curls, it seems like it could be pretty interesting balancing the space between each curl and the hair that's overlapping. So if we could talk a little bit about that, I think that would be awesome.
Sure, look forward to it. It's always fun trying to share, what I can, and know that it helps improve everyone's drawings. I hope that's my goal. And yet there's sometimes so much that can be said about it. I hope I'm not going on too long, but it's exciting to realize we have the control to achieve what we want, which brings more fun to our drawing experience.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody out there watching. We do these for you. We want to learn what it is you need help with, or where your trouble areas are, and respond. And this gives us a more personal way of doing that. And as always, we invite you to leave comments below in the comments section and let us know what you thought about this video. Do you still dread the graphite shine? Do you feel like it's still inevitable? Let us know, or tell us what you took from this video. We definitely want to hear it. And we'll be back with another video. We'll keep you posted and let you know when that one's up and ready to go. But again, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for answering the question and giving us your feedback, and for allowing us to share it with you today. Thank you.